container, so they just kind of.
Enemy in the container.
Oh well. Thank you for pretty much confirming what I just said.
Right now, I resided somewhere in Minnesota. It's cold. It's like negative 18 degrees outside right now.
80s pop funk. You know.
My first job was on Madden, Madden 20. Sure thing. All right, so I'm Jarory de Jesus. I work at Respawn as a narrative designer on Star Wars, and in my spare time, I also work on a hip-hop JRPG called Concrete Rose. A little bit about what a narrative designer does, basically bring together the story and the implementation. So a lot of like, how does the dialogue go from being on paper to being on screen? And that process is a lot of what I do. And in the process, I also work closely with writers to tell them like, hey, this isn't working here, or like, you know, this is a good idea, but it's going to cost us this much time because we need these many animations to make this idea come to life, and how can we work around that? That's a lot of what I spend my time doing. And then in my spare time, I do a lot of code to bring my game to life as well.
So kind of break down, how did you even kind of get started with all of this stuff?
Oh man, that's a journey. All right, so my bachelor's degree is in anthropology, of all things.
Okay.
I was going to grad school for that. I was doing like a PhD program and I hated it. I wanted out, so I taught myself how to code, and I accidentally built like a game while doing that, and I kind of had a knack for it, right? So I was like working this job. It's kind of like a dead end coding job, and I was watching YouTube videos. And they were talking about, I think it was extra credits, and they were talking about game schools, and like, you know, how to tell if it's a good one or a bad one. And I was like, you know what? I was in Florida at the time, so I was like, if there's one in Florida, I'll apply. Turns out the number 2, now number 1 program in the country for game development at the graduate level is at the University of Central Florida in Orlando. It's called FIA. So I applied to FIA, got in on a provisional acceptance because my grades weren't that great from undergraduate, but they were like, hey, you got some talent, so we're watching you, but you can come in. Did the program, got out with a master's degree in game development. And then my first job was on Madden, Madden 20. And I'll remember this to the day I die. I never applied for it. They called me. They're like, hey, do you want to work on the story mode for Madden? It's like 8 a.m. and I'm tired. And I'm just like, yo, Madden has a story mode? And I should have got the job after that, but I did get the job. Apparently they went to my school and asked for some candidates, and they put my name forward because I worked really hard. So that was pretty cool. And then from there it was history. I've worked on Marvel games, I've worked on casino games, I work on a Star Wars game. I also have an indie title out called Scamp. That was what we built in grad school and then a little bit afterwards. So yeah, I've done a couple things now.
So like, I mean, clearly you have like a kind of a plethora of like games you kind of worked on in like different genres and stuff like that. Like, what did you play like growing up? Like, what was like your smashes? So like, I'm pretty sure you probably draw inspiration and stuff from the stuff that you played. So
yes,
what did you play?
I played a lot of Knights of the Old Republic. That was one of my favorite games.
Okay.
Played a lot of fighting games with my brother and my cousins. A lot of Halo, a lot of like, for me, gaming was all about bringing like me, my cousins, and my brother together. So you play like 4-player co-op Halo, 4-player Super Smash Brothers. You know, any game that let the 4 of us like go in and do either be co-op or you know, when you playing Halo and one person got the sword hunting down the other ones. You know, whatever it was that we could like either compete or come together. That was a lot of what we played growing up. There's actually one game I saw it at a con. I've never seen this game other than in my childhood. It's called Flying Dragon, and it's like a animated chibi fighting game for the Nintendo 64. I almost bought it. I didn't have the money, but I gotta buy that next time because that was what I grew up on.
Yeah, for sure. So kind of dive in a little bit. I mean, you say you worked on the Madden story mode. You know, so like, let's go there. So like kind of dive into like what you were kind of doing with that. I mean, because Madden's a huge title. I mean, you know, regardless of what you think of it, I mean, it is a massive title. And that was I don't know if that was the first story mode.
Okay.
Yeah. So I knew it was somewhere in there. So like just kind of explain like what you were doing with that.
Sure. So the story mode was trying to live up to the previous one, which you know, so it was like, okay, we gotta like make it bigger and better. And one of the things that we came up with was this thing called the scenario engine, which is like after you do the main story, you would go into a campaign with the character you created in the main story as your quarterback, and then you would get text messages throughout the season from other people, and you could reply with text messages. And that kind of created your story. So like one of the scenarios would be like, oh, you're going up against Tom Brady. Well, good luck out there. You know, if you can score 2 touchdowns against Tom Brady's team, you know, we'll give you a nice like bonus, and then you get a stat bonus after that. So I wrote the system that got all the scenarios into Engine. So the writers would write out something. And I was what's called a technical designer at the time, not a narrative designer yet. So I was doing a lot of tools, and they would write their script. I would read their script and then create the nodes in Engine needed to actually parse those words and get them delivered to the character so the player could see them.
That's pretty interesting, man. I mean, and it seems like, I mean, how kind of like complex, I mean, is it like how like complex can it get? I'm pretty sure like, that can kind of get you know, it can kind of run together on you after a while.
I've done about 4 dialogue systems now. The simplest was on Scamp, which was the grad school project, and that was like it was a CSV table, so like an Excel file, right? So it was an Excel file, and each line was marked with a number, and then the engine would match the number to the line. So it'd be like, okay, this is conversation 2, and then it would read conversation 2, and then it would go from there. And it would have like the associated audio file names with that line, so it played the right audio file at the right time, because we have voice acting in that game. Madden was infinitely more complex than that, because we had what we would use these tags, so like it was like metadata basically on each line, so it would know like, okay, this speaker could be any quarterback on the opposing team, and then it would read what the enemy team was. So if you were playing, you know, at the time it would be the New England Patriots, it would be like, okay, here's Tom Brady. And then like if you were playing what is it, the Chiefs, right? Mahomes. Yeah. So if you're playing against Mahomes, and you would or the Chiefs, you would get Mahomes, and so
you
it
gotta
would
do
read
that for every quarterback, so.
No. So you didn't do it for every quarterback. What you did is you would have it read the data and then fill in the quarterback based on who was what team you were on. So you only wrote it once, and it was the only time in my advice I ever got writing advice, which was don't make it colorful, because make it more generic, because any player could say that line. Any quarterback in the NFL would be able to say that line. So you didn't want to put too much personality there. Star Wars is a bit different. You know, they want flavor, they want personality, and so it's a little different writing for that.
So, and you said Star Wars is kind of what you're working on now?
Yeah, Respawn on the Star Wars Jedi team.
Okay. And so I guess like as you're working on that and kind of towards the future, like kind of where are you kind of headed as far as, you know, work, like as you kind of evolve within what you do? Like, like where is it going for you?
Ultimately, I want to get to the place where I'm running my own studio. That's what Concrete Rose is going to be, the platform that I eventually propel that with. I want to be able to tell stories that I think don't get told otherwise, right? Like no one is going to tell a story about hip hop in a game unless they come from that background. You know, back in the day in high school, I was making beats, I was writing rhymes, I was doing all that. I don't do that much anymore, but I still, you know, when I'm writing a hip hop game, it's easy to kind of tap into that and be like, all right, let me write rhymes for these characters, you know, and have them tell their story. So, but because I grew up in that culture, it's important to me, and I don't think I'm going to see a lot of, you know, waspy type people telling those kind of stories. So kind of close this out, like what, like,
I already kind of got you to like explain kind of what's like up next, but like in the future, like kind of see down the road, the big picture, like you own your own studio, you're doing your own thing. Like what type of games do you want to kind of work on? Like what type of things that you want to do? Like do you have
Yeah.
any, like give me big picture?
I really wanted to work on story heavy games that tell stories that wouldn't otherwise get told. So beyond like this hip hop game, you know, which for me is important because every time I've looked at like hip hop in the games, it's always been like a rhythm game, right? You
Yeah.
know, I want something that's like about hip hop culture, but not necessarily, you know, a rhythm game.
Right.
So I want to tell that. There's other games I wanted to work on. There's another idea I have floating around for a I don't know if you're familiar with the Taino, the indigenous people to the Caribbean before Columbus came and, you know, killed
Okay.
everyone. So I want to tell that story because my family, you know, half black, half Puerto Rican, and my family comes from that lineage, and so that's a story that I don't think anybody's really going to talk about. And there's so
Right.
much rich history and culture and mythology in there. You know, and same for other indigenous cultures throughout the, you know, Western Hemisphere, from North to South America. There's a lot of, you know, we borrow from the Maya and the Aztec a lot for mythology because those are the popular ones, but there's also the Olmec. There's plenty of indigenous tribes in the Northeast and the Southwest that have their own rich lore. And I would love to learn about those stories and then translate those into games. That's kind of been my focus, are the underserved communities in gaming.
And I think also storytelling in games, like sort of kind of gets pushed back a little bit because it's kind of been more leaning now towards the battle royales
and the esports. It really depends on the studio. Like Naughty Dog is always going to tell story heavy
Naughty
games.
Dog is great.
That's their thing. You know, Santa Monica, same deal, right? They're telling their story, their action story games. Whereas like your Ubisofts and your Activisions, they're more on the bottom line dollar, so they're making these multiplayer experiences that they can have these microtransactions in. It really varies from studio to studio, but where I see myself in, you know, 5-10 years, where I see my position in the industry is giving a voice to other people who don't have a voice and telling their stories.